Hi everyone. So today what I want to talk to you about is PCOS and fertility diet, or like how to eat for fertility. And so kind of the three biggest things I would say in terms of even just eating for PCOS when we think about it is thinking about balancing insulin and glucose. That's like number one, I would say, because majority of patients who have PCOS have some kind of insulin resistance there. The second thing is inflammation, is really trying to reduce any foods that are inflammatory to the body so that the body has a chance to like build a nice egg um, for ovulation. And then the third thing I would say is nutrient dense meals. So really getting all those antioxidants from a variety of different types of food. So I'm going to go over this in a little bit of detail. But basically, when we think of like what type of diet out there that we can like kind of follow, I think a lot of research is based on the Mediterranean diet. But I would say maybe it's like a mix between a paleo type of diet and a Mediterranean type of diet. So I'm going to read you the definition of a paleo diet so you really know what it's about. So basically, it includes lean meats, fish, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and foods that in the past could be attained by hunting and gathering. Paleo diet actually limits the foods that were commonly came about when farming emerged about 10,000 years ago. So these are things like dairy products, legumes, and grains, which is really important. In terms of the Mediterranean diet, it includes a variety of fruits and vegetables. It's really kind of focused on that. Herbs, nuts and seeds, beans, and whole grains. Meals are kind of built around these plant-based foods with moderate amounts of like dairy product, poultry, which is chicken, and eggs, which is also kind of central to the Mediterranean diet, as is like seafood. So in contrast to red meat, which is only really eaten occasionally. So, like the Mediterranean diet does kind of have that dairy and grains in there, but it's whole grain products. So, I would say it's kind of like a mix of both paleo and Mediterranean, where like in paleo, there's no grains at all. Mediterranean, there is a little bit of grains, but we're eating whole grains. So, these are complex carbohydrates like brown rice, quinoa, buckwheat, millet, those types of foods. When we think of balancing insulin and glucose, what we want to do is really make sure that we're eating enough good healthy fats and good protein with our meals. So that will help to balance blood sugar, especially if you're eating some carbohydrates with that meal. You really don't want to be having carbohydrates just on their own. That will spike your blood insulin and glucose and cause disruption in the balance of that. Because oftentimes, if we have lots of insulin in the bloodstream, it can increase the amount of testosterone we're building, and that can lead to some of the symptoms that we see with PCOS. So, if we think about talking about inflammation, the biggest foods we want to really focus on and removing are the dairy products and also I would say gluten. So, dairy can actually increase insulin, and so that will cause an imbalance between insulin and glucose, like we just spoke about. And then also, gluten can be quite inflammatory for some people. So, if you have like a food sensitivity to gluten, I would definitely recommend taking that out. So sometimes the food sensitivity can come up with like bloating, headaches, fatigue, even like pain can be associated with that, skin conditions like eczema. So if you have any of these, especially if you're eating quite a bit of gluten or dairy, I would consider removing it and seeing if your symptoms improve. The other thing is sugar. Sugar is very inflammatory. It's a processed food. So even removing and reducing the amount of sugar you take in will really help your body in making sure things are balanced, especially with like stress and your hormones. All those things can be impacted, especially if you're eating processed foods or foods that are inflammatory. So I talked about insulin and glucose, I talked about inflammatory foods, and now I want to talk about nutrient dense meals. So like how to really bring a food plate for PCOS and fertility, how to really build that out. So first things first, when we're building a plate, there's four things to consider. The four food groups basically. You want to look at vegetables, you want to look at protein, you want to look at healthy fats, and carbohydrates, and fruits. And so when we try to build a plate, you want to get majority of your plate to have a good amount of vegetables. And these are non-starchy vegetables, like dark leafy green vegetables, especially things like spinach, um, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, kale. All of these have like a lot of nutrients in them, so they're very nutrient dense. And then, lean proteins like chicken, fish, um, and eggs, things like that. So they should be kind of like the palm size of your hand. And then in terms of carbohydrates, you can still have grains, that's no problem. I would even stick to starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes, um, and even like pumpkin, butternut squash, like all of those like are really good to add to your meals. Um, but yeah, you can even do things like brown rice, quinoa, buckwheat, millet. Those are all really good whole grains that are not processed. And then healthy fats are a big one that people tend to like forget about and not put enough into their meals. But consider like cooking with good healthy oils like avocado oil, olive oil. Those are really good. Even like grapeseed oil, flax oil, adding like all of those onto your salads and things like that. Cooking with coconut oil if you're cooking at a high temperature, that's a good one if you want to do some more high temperature cooking. And then fruits. So the best fruits are probably berries, honestly, especially even for fertility because they're loaded with lots of antioxidants, and they don't spike your blood insulin and glucose. So those are probably the best types of fruits to be having. So berries, in terms of like strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, those are all really good. Or raspberries, I love raspberries. So yeah, choosing those ones are probably your best bet. Um, so yeah, so we went kind of over everything. So protein, vegetables, healthy fats, and fruits and carbs. So if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments, and we'll see you back here soon. Take care.